Peace and greetings. Presenting the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, providing in-depth information on society and culture in America and abroad, bringing you truth messages of inspiration, keen insight, reputable interviews, and so much more. So now, for the truth you've been waiting for, your host of the Network of Awareness podcast, ORRA, the informationalist.
You are now tuned in to the Network of Awareness.
Yes, peace and greetings, people from around the world. Welcome to the Network of Awareness. I'm your host, ORRA, the informationalist, owner and founder of the Network of Awareness. And today we have another great show that's going to bring about a lot of great information and great substance from a brother that is a New York police officer. And we're going to touch on a lot of things when it comes to this title of the show, which is Erroneous Law Enforcement, amongst other things. And the officer that I am going to be bringing on the show is Joe Smith. And he has a wealth of information. And we're going to get to know Joe Smith a little bit and talk about this erroneous law enforcement here in New York. And we're going to talk about law enforcement overall. And we're going to talk about some of his aspirations on why he became a police officer, amongst other things. So another great one for today on this episode of Erroneous Law Enforcement for Season 5. And for those that don't know, Season 5 is all about great understandings. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, let's bring on Joe Smith onto the show and give him a warm welcome and a warm round of applause like we always do. Let's go. Yes. Good morning, grand rising to you, Joe, and welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. Good morning to you. I'm feeling well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on to the show. It's definitely a pleasure and an honor to have you on this show. And I've had a couple of people in law enforcement before. I even had a brother that was one of the NYPD 12 that went against the New York City Police Department in the way that they were forcing officers to conduct themselves in a very unprofessional and unlawful manner with citations and many other things, targeting especially black and brown people. And I always like bringing on law enforcement onto the show because I think it's important that people get to know these officers on a more intimate level because of the stigma and of the perception that law enforcement in this country gives off when it comes to racism and many other things. And it's not always good. But I do know from experience that there are good officers out there. So not all the apples are rotten. There are some good apples. Now, with that being said, can you tell me if law enforcement, when you decided to become a police officer, was that like a childhood dream for you? Is that something you always wanted to do as a kid?
Far from the truth. I did not want to be a police officer. Didn't like police officers. I liked the way I was treated by police officers. Living in the South Bronx, walking around, being stopped by unmarked vehicles, thrown against the wall, having my football thrown across the street, elbows on your back, being frisked over and over again, nothing ever to be found, being disrespected. You tend not to like police officers growing up. So that was not my dream. I wanted to be a pilot. That was my dream. But it ended up that I became a police officer, but for different reasons. I saw that there was a lot of work that my neighborhood needed. There was, my fellow black and brown people. There was a lot of crime, a lot of poverty, and one person, and she was a Italian female detective, told me, "You're going to make some change. You got to join the force and make change within." That was one of my first intros to police department, and that's why I became a cop.
Wow, that's great. And a lot of times there's people that go into government like that and say that you never really can change the system. You may have an influence on it. Sometimes when you go into a particular structured system like government or like law enforcement, say that the system winds up changing you. Do you feel that by being in the police department that the same man that came into the police department is the same man, or have you changed, and has the police department had a significant effect on your personality and character overall from when you first joined?
I'm going to try to answer that not too directly, because I don't believe that change is the word. I believe that one of my strongest attributes is to adapt. Okay. And whenever my environment adapts, I just adapt to it. If you want to use the word change, yes, I'm definitely not the same person I went in. I am me, but I have to adapt to my environment as it changed, or I get the environment basically ends you. Wherever you go, like the dinosaurs, if you don't adapt, basically you get ended. I walked in there thinking I was going to save the world, one black and brown person at a time, and it went down to a crawl. It wasn't as quick as I thought, and I had to go through some internal struggles because of what I ran into. The corruption within the department, the lies, the deception. Sometimes I looked at police officers as they was just as bad as the criminals. They lied, but they used the ADAs, the district attorneys. They used the law, the penal law, the vehicle traffic law. They use all those things to justify what they did. Sometimes they planted evidence. Sometimes they beat somebody up. I mean, there was so many things that was observed that I had internal struggles of, was I the bad guy or was I the good guy? It was just it took a while to understand, and a lot of self-growth to where I'm at right now. So I have adapted, and there's a lot of scars, but I am better for it, more knowledgeable, but with knowledge, you definitely got a lot of wounds, and, I'm still healing from it.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, because it takes a lot to be that honest with what you experienced, because, other people would give me a completely different answer from that. When it comes to law enforcement, when you first came in and you say, you try to save the world, I think pretty much anybody who joins law enforcement comes in with that particular mindset and attitude that they're going to change the world. What was some of the first things that you experienced being a New York City police officer that really kind of opened up your eyes to be like, did you ever have that moment to say to yourself, damn, what the hell did I get myself into?
Not many moments, too many. I have some journals that I wrote. I have about 4 books that I write in, and I just keep writing and writing and writing. There's so many. Right off the bat is joining the police department and all the BS you have to go through. It's almost I think they try to do like a boot camp. They try to break you right off the bat, and you just see the hypocrisy and just standing online. Nothing's organized, and you have to get through it, and then you go into the police department. They teach you by the book what you're supposed to be doing, and as soon as you hit the streets, the commanding officers, the lieutenants, the sergeants, they tell you straight up, throw that out. Everything you learned by the book, throw it out the window. It doesn't exist here. This is the South Bronx, and you're going to do it the way we tell you to do it. And when they say we, it's basically your supervisors. So you might learn that you're not allowed to frisk for drugs. First thing you do is frisk somebody for drugs. You're not allowed to stop somebody for whatever reason. You just jump out and start stopping everybody. They put you in a van and you jump out there and you're like, why are we stopping this guy? There should be some reasonable reason to stop somebody. No, just there he is. Stop him. He's black. He's Hispanic. He's walking down the streets. It's a drug prone location. Jump out the van. We say toss him, which is go through his pockets, head to toe, find nothing, get back in the van. can't leave it. Just leave them be. And you do that all day long. Well, if you do that all day long, you're bound to find something. And from anything from what we used to call back in the days a roach, which is like marijuana, which is a little bit, it's like the leftovers.
I know a lot about that.
Yeah, that was arrestable. Like that would do high five each other. Oh, we got another bag off the street because they got a roach in their pocket. Well, not actual roach, very little piece of marijuana. Or if you're driving, they're going through your ashtray, and if you see a little bit of marijuana, he's under arrest. Now
marijuana is legal in New York City. It's crazy, right?
Yes. And the arrests have gone down because of it, because a lot of the arrests was based on marijuana. And the quantity was so absurd. It wasn't a bag. It was a crumb of marijuana, and you're under arrest. It was just, and then of course they fight. So then you add resisting, OGA, you had everything else, assault on a police officer. So it starts off with that little grain of rice of marijuana, and then it turns into a felony arrest. And if you had some prior convictions, this is another thing that bothered me, it would automatically become a felony. So this nonsense stop, now you have a felony arrest. And a lot of police officers are gauged by how many felony arrests. When they speak with each other, how many arrests you have? I have 500. How many of them are felonies? Now it's like, oh, I'm better than you because I have 400 felonies and you only have 200, whatever the case is. Or you're what we call a misdemeanor king, which is his entire life is all misdemeanors. So it's a culture, and it starts with, there's so many layers. I mean, it's hard to stop, but that is right off the bat. As soon as I got into the precinct, it was, it's us versus them. Forget about the rule book. The only time they use the rule book is when you get in trouble. You get in trouble, they open up the rule book and say, hey, we taught you not to do this. Why did you do it? And you can't say anything because you did it, whatever that is. If you weren't supposed to strip search somebody and you did, and you got caught or something happened, now you're the bad guy. Why did you do it? You can't say your sergeant did it or told you to do it or the captain told you to do it. They're going to deny it. It's your word versus them. That was another thing. A lot of these orders were verbal. So if you did something wrong and you were ordered to do something wrong, you had no way of proving it. That's why these cameras that are coming up a little bit better now, because when you're on scene, you can hear the boss give you orders. And they can go back and say, well, you ordered me to do it, and that's why I did it. In a way, that's why these cameras are helping in different ways. And also false allegations from perpetrators who say he hit me or he spoke to me a certain way. But yeah, that was right off the bat. It's just forget about the rule book. And they teach you the dirtiest way to do things. And if you were the dirtiest of the dirty, you would be elected to go to special ops. And special ops is basically, you don't do patrol, you don't answer 911 jobs, you just go and they give you a car, you run around and you just jump out the car and search everybody and arrest people. Your job is to arrest. And the big three, when my career was active, I have approximately 20 years on the force today, about to retire. And it was a summonses, it was stop and frisk, and it was arrests. And you get different points for different arrests. If it was a felony, you get a bigger that a boy. If it was a misdemeanor, it's like, good job, not good enough. If it was like a return on a warrant, depending where you were, it's okay. And if you got summonses, they loved it. But the key is whatever was the topic of the day, that's what they want you to bring in. So double park summonses, if it was a big deal with the community, you brought those in, you could have a day off or you could have the overtime you wanted. Back when I was going on, it had a lot to do with quotas. Everything had to do with numbers. Everything had to do with quotas. So you name it, everything was a number. Everything was controlled by CompStat. And that was the first time. I mean, I have many turning moments in my career where I saw stuff that was just horrific. And again, I had to internalize it, deal with it, and process it, but still remain an officer and still try to make a difference one person at a time, one conversation at a time. One turning moment was I was speaking. I had a Irish partner and he was being very rude to this Spanish lady. And I told her in Spanish, don't worry about this racist asshole. I got you. And I started talking to her in Spanish. I told her what to do. I told her what she was doing was wrong, but this is how you fix it. Don't do it again, et cetera, et cetera. And I told her how to do some stuff. And then just went back to it. I had to deal with that every day. Same guy in my car. I had to act one way with him and then one way with whoever called 911. I had to go deal with them and try to help help them, but silently so that I don't hurt the culture that I'm in that could turn around and bite me. So you got to, there was a lot of juggling to make it through, and it's not easy.
Yeah. You had to maneuver within that brotherhood to make sure that you're not overstepping boundaries.
Yes.
And sisterhood as well. Something that I've experienced a lot, just like you, getting thrown up on walls in New York City growing up and being falsely accused of stuff, or possibly fitting a description of a possible suspect in a recent crime that an APB was put out or whatever on. But as I got older and I got wiser in understanding laws, especially in the United States of America, where these draconian laws are very arbitrary, to say the least.
Yep.
But what I noticed, and I want to get your perspective on this, is that especially when I moved upstate New York with so-called white cops and particularly men, I noticed that a lot of police officers, and I noticed this in New Jersey too, where a lot of police officers, I feel like the mental evaluation that's done on these people is not sufficient. I noticed that a lot of cops are narcissistic, and I didn't know it at the time, but I used to experience a lot, and I've seen it a lot on YouTube with people that videotape their encounters with the police. And it's like, if you question police officers, like a simple question like, hey, why did I get pulled over? Or why are you stopping me, like in the street? Or just question them anything. It's always this, oh, you got an attitude, you're a tough guy, or what's your problem? Now I'm going to give you a problem. And I always felt that was very unjustified. It's like, if I'm questioning you, or even if I have an attitude, that doesn't mean that you can now turn into an asshole and literally violate me as an American citizen and violate my civil liberties under the constitutional law that you're supposed to abide by. But yet we see it time and time again. Well, I'm going to ask you, make you do this because you're giving me attitude. Since you're being difficult, now I'm going to become this whole different person that immediately is unprofessional and unethical. And I wanted to get your perception on that, because I see that as a problem back then, 25, 30 years ago when I was experiencing it, and even as I experienced it as an adult. And I see it now. I see it on a bunch of YouTube videos and on Instagram and TikTok and all these people that share these videos with law enforcement. I wanted to get what you think about this, considering that, you've been a police officer for 23 years.
We can start off with, I just want to start off with something you said about APB, and then I'll get to that. It's funny you said that, but as soon as they go over the radio and put a description out of somebody, that was an excuse for, a radius of everyone in that neighborhood to be stopped within 10 blocks of wherever it was from. And you can say, hey, he got in a car and he fled, or he or she fled. It was an excuse to stop somebody. As soon as that someone just got robbed and they fit a description and you look like it, because, all Hispanic people look alike and all black people look alike in their minds. So everyone in that perimeter would get stopped. That was just one of the things you said. And this is why that's why so many people got stopped. You talking about the attitude about some of these cops. A lot of these cops come out of high school. My thing is, how mature are you when you come out of high school? I mean, you're
not
so
very mature
close.
at all.
None at all. But you're granted the privilege, the authority to take people's freedom away. You're given a 20-year-old that freedom, or 21-year-old, whatever the limit is in your county or state. You're giving that person power. Power corrupts. But he or she is immature. Some of them live with their parents. They don't pay rent. They have no kind of they haven't grown up yet. But yet you're asking that person to show up at my house, and I'm 50 plus years old. I'm having an argument with my wife. He's not married. He's living in his basement, or he or she. How is he going to understand my situation? He's not. So you got this young guy trying to, help me out in my situation, and they teach him things. What's the one thing they want? It's the quota. It's arrest, summonses, and stop and frisk. Those are the three tools they used. So they go to your house. You call 911. You go there. What are their tools? Arrest you, summons you. They're not there to help you. They're there to meet the quota. And they're mature. So they're not there to help you. You call 911. A lot of people say, oh, call 911. We're here to help. They are not there to help. They're there to arrest you, summons you, 250 you. There's politicians behind the police department that require them to write summonses to make money for the city or this other state or whatever county you're in. The more summonses they write, the more the county gets. So in their mind, they're not there to help you. So the reason I think that happens is because they're immature. they're 20, 21, 22 years old, making life and death decisions. And they're given power. As soon as you make them look bad, they have to resort to that one trick they have. I can take your liberty away. I can lie. I don't like your attitude. I can hit you with disorderly conduct. If you look it up, there are many that back in the days you were allowed to curse at cops. If you were acting aggressively, if you were trying to fight, if you threatened somebody, and now you got to say what was the threat? Did you reach into your pocket? They can articulate so much, and they arrest you. There goes the power, the abuse of power, and they're taught this by other cops. Say, hey, if you ever bump into this type of person, we call him an asshole. If you bump into an asshole, you can do this to him or her. So too many people bump into these people, these young cops, and they just get swept up into the system. And I believe it's because they're so young. That's one reason. And the culture teaches them what to do. They're stopping you for one reason. It's to give you a summons to arrest you. Why else are they stopping? They're not there to say hello. They're not there to say have a good day, no, if they're stopping you, it's because they either want to arrest you, summons you, or create some sort of paper trail, which is like stop and frisk. That's what I would say. And definitely it's mostly a taught behavior in the culture of the police department. If one guy went through it, he's going to teach the next person, the next person, this person. If that guy becomes a sergeant, he will teach the people under him. When he or she becomes a lieutenant, etc. But it's taught.
Wow, that was a great answer, by the way. That was a great answer because it makes so much sense, especially when it comes to maturity and understanding life. And what do you think in regards to what we just spoke about? What would you think would be a good approach besides the psychological evaluation being more in depth? What do you think would be a good approach in having rookie officers as far as assigning particular duties for them when they first get into the force? Or do you even think that you should be a certain age when you come into the force? What do you think about that?
I believe that unfortunately, this job, you need young people because it is physical. You're going to go through a lot. Your body will age exponentially. So yes, the youth is fine. The problem what I see is they let them go up the rank too much, too quickly. So this 20-year-old or 21-year-old who's immature is going to be a sergeant within, depending on where you're at, 4 to 5 years. So now he's 25, he or she's 25, still immature, a little bit better, but still immature, still making decisions. But now he's in charge of a whole lot of people. When you're a sergeant, you got, 16, 20 people under you, sometimes more than that. And you have to make a decision. And if you're immature, you're going to make an immature decision, and you have a lot of cops out there with time. What would be the solution? I would say slow it down. Yes, you could still become a police officer at 21 or 18 or whatever the number is. And you have to slow them down and let them learn slowly. And there's no substitute for wisdom and experience. You got to put them out there with someone who knows what they're doing or has more of a level head. And too many times when I was a police officer, we had somebody with 1 year on training us. So the person who came out of the academy and went through the South Bronx for 1 year was the one teaching us what to do. And a lot of people with time just did not want to be involved. So yeah, I mean, one of the thing is hire the young people, but you got to let them mature. And they let them go through the ranks way too fast. They put them in special ops way too soon. And they have a lot of immaturity. And also is the culture. The culture within, there's no accountability. The captain who's responsible for ordering whatever, he gets to retire. He doesn't go to jail. He might have to pay some monetary fine, but there is no one is accountable. Nobody important. Because once that person leaves, you're replaced by somebody else. So the accountability is very important. You rarely see a captain, chief, or inspector go to jail. They just retire. And the next chief comes in. And they tell him, as soon as you get in trouble, we'll let you retire. And it's just, and the wheel just keeps going round and round. They just keep getting replaced, and the culture will never change. Let's start with accountability first. And another thing is very important if you want to make some changes is there's a lot of whistleblowers out there. People who see things and want to make changes. This department, as soon as you open your mouth, you become a target. And they try to discredit you because let's just say we're all human, we make mistakes. And if you have some sort of discipline record, they will use that against you and say that you're not, that you're lying and you're not a good witness or there's something wrong with you. They'll discredit you and then try to fire you. And remember, they're in control of when you get in trouble, whether your shoes are shined, you get too many of those, you get in trouble, you show up late for whatever you have childcare issues, and they could be understanding and just let you take your time or write you up. That's their choice. So they could, if you were a whistleblower, they can write you up so many times to the point where you either going to make it hostile and you leave, or they'll fire you, or you just basically lose your mind, because after a while you will break. It's your mind can only take but so much.
You cover some great points, and I had mentioned, I've had other police officers come onto the show, and there was a documentary called Crime Plus Punishment, and great documentary on Hulu. Many of my listeners know about it. And for those that haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. And it was about these 12 police officers that were courageous enough to go against the very system that employs them, which is the New York City Police Department, the largest police department in the world. And they went against some of the ways that they were being ordered to citate or to bring about citations, meet quotas, a lot of unethical practices within law enforcement they knew was targeting so-called Black and brown people in New York City, which primarily New York City is just filled with primarily Black and brown people, especially when it comes to Hispanics and Blacks. And I wanted to get your perspective on that, because I actually had an officer on here that was part of that 12. And since you have a vast amount of experience in law enforcement, 23 years, about to retire, I wanted to ask you some questions in regards to some of the things that were presented in that documentary. And one of them was that when it comes to, and you mentioned this previously, like just a little while ago, you mentioned about how if you go against certain things, you wind up becoming a target, and you wind up becoming a pariah a lot of times. And I've seen this happen through different institutions of law enforcement, whether it be police departments, corrections, sheriff, court officers, probation officers. I've heard it all from all different types of officers. And a lot of times they tell me that, and even my own brother said this, he said, when I first got into corrections, I thought my biggest problem was going to be the inmates. But he said the biggest problem wound up becoming my fellow officers. They were the more grimier ones that you actually watch your back with than the actual inmates. He said the inmates were actually nicer and more trustworthy, believe it or not, than the actual officers that he was working with side by side that are supposed to be his brothers to protect them. So with that being said, when it comes to this documentary, have you been able to watch it, by the way?
Yes, I saw it.
Okay, great.
It was good. I saw like several stories happening, and it was done well. They showed from different points of view, from the point of view of the young Hispanic Black person in the streets, the point of view of the cops under pressure to make arrests, the court system, which was very interesting. They showed some stuff that was happening there, some corruption.
Yes.
Which and the what is it with the bail system, which was interesting. That was a nice twist where I didn't realize how much money the bail bondsmen make, and how corrupt that system is. Yes, I saw it. It was pretty good.
So let me ask you a question, since you saw it. When it comes to these citations that they were telling them to focus on these, especially young Hispanic Black males, when you first saw that, what did you think about that? Because I felt like this is something that's been going on for decades. This is nothing new. This has been going on for as long as the police department has been around, especially when you look at some of the documentaries that cover the police departments from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, it was the Wild Wild West. I mean, there was so much corruption. I mean, Serpico was one of those movies that really shed light on all of that. Yeah. And Serpico was one of the, I wouldn't say one of the first, but he was one of the more commercialized, publicized, notarized officers that was brought into the limelight in regard to whistleblowing within the department. And I wanted to ask you a specific question. When it came to these citations, did you ever fall into these predicaments where you were being verbally told something, like you had mentioned earlier, to do something that you knew wasn't right and it wasn't written on paper? And I find that to be interesting because they're really slick and cunning in the way they go about that. Because, hey, I'm going to tell you to do this, but I'm not going to have a paper trail to where it can come back to bite me in the ass. So can you shed some light on that in regards to being told to do unethical things, like to build these citations to meet quotas?
Yes, it starts off with Comstat. Obviously, way before Comstat, this was more Bratton era, when Bratton was police police commissioner, and he started with Comstat, and he controlled numbers. So it's how many people you stop. It started off just stopping people in a certain neighborhood. And as time went on, it morphed into more of when Kelly took over, it became a numbers game where it was strict numbers. Back then, it was all right, just stop as many Black and Hispanic in this area, arrest as many as you can. But it became a science when Kelly took over. Now we had specific numbers, and it was a laundry list. We have to go in this area, in a 10-block radius, and we had to get Black males within a certain age category, usually anywhere between 15 and 25. And they had to be Black males. They could not be white. They couldn't be women. They had to be Black in that area. They called it the impact zone. And it was a laundry list. If you didn't get that, you would get poor evaluations. Eventually, they'll try to fire you. There's many ways of doing it. But yeah, I was under tremendous stress, especially during the Kelly era. And that was a good 8 years, I think 12 of hell. The first 4 were not that bad, but then it got really bad, and it was a laundry list. Meet this list, the quota, or else. And it wasn't just me. It was the captain was under pressure, the lieutenant was under pressure, the sergeants were under pressure. They would tell the lieutenant who was going to school that if you don't get X amount of summonses, if you don't get your guys to write X amount of summonses, then we're going to send you to the midnight. And now your childcare, your school, you just did, how much money school costs. But now you're in the midnights, you can't go to school, or they send you to a day tour while the class is going on. You have to work. So the pressure is astronomical, especially, and it started off at the captain all the way down. The captain was not going to get promoted. When you become captain, you want to go to the next level and get paid more money, which is a deputy inspector. And then from there, you become inspector. Eventually, you're on your way to become a chief. But if you don't make sure this quota is filled, you're not going anywhere. And and you know how shit rolls. It rolls downhill. It stops right at the lap of the police officers, which is me. And all they could do to me is fire me. So they can build a case against me eventually if I don't meet the quota. Yes, very big, very strong quota presence. And it was a work environment that no one should work in, because you knew you were doing the wrong thing. You knew you were stopping people for no reason. Some people would plant evidence because they needed an arrest for the month. It's bad. It's not healthy for people, especially if you're trying to help the public. You're too busy trying to get that arrest. You don't care about people's health or well-being. You want that arrest first, and then you care about it after you met your quota for the month. You can relax, and now you can try to help people. But it's contradicting when you become a police officer. So yeah, I definitely went through it, and I saw the different aspects of like the documentary that they covered all the aspects. I went through everything they went through. I went through it also.
When it comes to stress, a lot of police officers wind up dealing with their stress in very detrimental ways. Could be substance abuse. A lot of times it's alcoholism. There is a high rate of divorce within police officers where they get married, and next thing you know, they're divorced within a 5 to 10 year period. Yes. Depending the situation. There's also, I remember growing up too around police officers, and I remember that there was this stereotype that wasn't really far from the truth, that a lot of police officers battered their wives or their significant others, and they would get off because they're police officers. So whenever a domestic call would come, it's like, hey, this is one of our brothers, we're going to be a little bit more lenient or turn a blind eye or whatever the case may be. And with all that being said, without getting too in depth, but I just wanted to get your perspective on how because you've been a police officer for 23 years. That's not an easy thing. It's quite amazing because you have this particular perspective that I find very admirable in the way you justify things within how you've experienced the police department. You don't, from just a little time I've spoken to you really haven't sugarcoated anything. A lot of times, you'll have officers that they try to paint this pretty picture when it comes to their prospective police departments that they work for, and try to make everything look like peaches and roses and like it's the best thing ever. Just like a lot of people paint this country as the best country in the world when a lot of us know otherwise. But with that being said, I just want to kind of get feedback from you on how you was able to deal with your your stress in a positive manner. And I'm assuming this in a positive manner because you've been doing it for 23 years and you're still here and you're still going strong and it hasn't broken you like it does, as it's done many of your brothers and sisters in the force. So how have you been able, or what's some of the things you've been able to do in order to overcome the adversity of stress that this particular position brings?
I would like to just add a little more to the risks of being a cop, just to show you that the things that you might go through that you might not know. We're exposed to chemicals, and we don't have any hazmat suits. We're just knock on the door, walk into situations, and we have hearing loss. We suffer from obesity. We get burned out very quickly in our personal lives, raising our kids and our significant others. You mentioned domestic violence. There's a high suicide rate. We get shot at. We do a lot of hand-to-hand combat with emotionally disturbed people which want to hurt you. You're there to help them and they just attack you. There's an extreme amount of stress within the department, at home. So you're getting it on both ends, and then you're getting a lot the quota stress that leads into it. When we have to testify in jury trials, a lot of people make stuff up. So that's very stressful when you have to lie under oath. It's something that I don't do. That's why it's very easy to testify, because if I don't know, I'm not going to make it up just to arrest the perpetrator. If I don't know, I don't know. But the district attorney sometimes will try to guide you in a way like, hey, you do know. I don't. If I don't know, I'm not making it up. I'm not going to perjure myself, because it's a lie that I got to remember, and it could come back to bite me. You have a lot of the equipment. It's not top of the line, so we end up with vests that don't work sometimes. We get bad bosses. We're taught to like what I call test a lie in traffic court, and basically lie and not tell the truth so you can win because the city wants more money. Basically, if you don't win in traffic court, a lot of times they will try to penalize you and punish you. They take vacation days away from you, so you have a choice: either make sure that person loses, or get vacations taken days away from you. So it's either you or me. That's a lot of stress to sit there and they want you to write the summons, but then you if you don't win in court, then they're going to punish you. So a lot of times the judge they have a quota too. They can't have everybody guilty. So that happens. That's just one of, just a list that I went through. And these are the stresses that police officers go through. Now, to get back to your question, can you repeat your question again? I'm sorry.
Just how you've been able to overcome some of these the adversity that this stress brings about, because you've been on the force for 23 years, so I'm pretty sure that you've experienced this stress, obviously. And I was just curious as to some of the things that you do to keep yourself sane, to keep yourself in a positive vibration, to where you can still continue to move forward instead of falling victim to a lot of these things that could have easily happened to you, especially like with I'm very well versed in understanding the dynamics of suicide. I've experienced it with a family member, and it takes a major toll on the people that are left behind. But I do understand the stresses. I had a nephew that committed suicide coming out of the military, and and I talked about this with another officer by the name of Richie Baez, that he was part of the 12. And we talked a little bit about suicide. And I told them about how when I look at especially the New York City Police Department, especially because I grew up in New York City. I grew up in the Bronx. My family's of Puerto Rican descent. And I experienced a lot of racism growing up as a child. And one of the things that I've noticed about the military, in equivalent to how the New York City Police Department is run, and many police departments around the country, is very, very much like the military, almost identical, especially the way, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, in the way they govern themselves. They govern themselves. And that's the biggest problem in the military and in law enforcement. And that's why in the military, you have a huge amount of raping going on, not just with females, but with males as well. Males get raped a lot. And my question to you is, when it comes to stuff like the suicide and how it's very much like the military and the way it's structured, you even said it. They said when you first come in, they try to break you and build you up, just like in the military. They want to break you down and make you become a puppet, make you become somewhat institutionalized and indoctrinated into how they want you to be. That's where the whole term, and I believe in the Marines term, that term, the meathead. And there's a lot to that. So my original question in regards to everything I've been just bringing about on the broadcast is, what are some of the things that you can share for those that are listening that may want to become police officers? Because I do have a lot of young listeners. I even have listeners that are trying to figure things out in life, and they're in their 20s and they want to pursue something. And some of them are looking as law enforcement as a possible career for themselves. So what are some of the things you can share to maintain that sanity, to maintain a positive mindset, to continue to move forward and do your job in the most ethical way possible?
Well, I would say, what I would say, how I dealt with all my stress is I had ways of getting rid of the stress. Sports is one of them. It's physical. It's football, basketball, baseball. You're young. You're in your 20s. You basically get it off your system. There's working out. I definitely say get a therapist. Be very careful of which therapist you get. That you got to get one that the department does not know you're talking to it, because a lot of times they would try to get that information and use it against you. But you definitely have to talk to somebody. If you're spiritual, keep an open dialogue with your priest, your pastor, whatever. You have to get it off your chest. The one thing that's be very careful is what I've done, which is wrong, is I brought my wife into it, or my girlfriend, and I would vent to them and get it off my chest. But the problem is when you have that negative energy and you dump it on somebody, that energy is now possessed by her. So you got rid of some of it, and now he or she is not built to handle it. She's not going through what you're going through, or he's not going through it. So now you're creating this darkness within your relationship. That's why we, for the most part, divorce so quickly. When you marry someone who's not a cop and doesn't understand that your work schedule does this to you and that, but you need somebody to talk to. Sometimes it's coworkers, but you got to be careful who you talk to, because they can say something to the wrong people and then you're under investigation. Definitely get it off your chest and talk to somebody. I was not a big therapy guy until I started to talk and get it off my chest. What I'm doing now is therapy. Me talking to you is therapeutic. This is why I've lasted long, because I can get it off my chest. And I have other means of hobbies that I could disconnect from watching a baby die, watching a dog get shot or run over by a car, watching somebody get some mother crying over their dog. All that stuff is this negative energy that you store. You have to find a way to get rid of it. And if you don't, it will eat you alive. Some people will last long, but a lot of cops turn into meatheads at the end of their career. They're emotionally detached from everything because of what they saw. Because they stop being human. Go out there and dance and listen to music and talk to people. Don't just become a cop where you're going to box yourself in. You need a getaway, and you need another life other than cop. You can't just hang out with cops and talk with cops. You need to be human and go out there and be a normal person. I know it's difficult, but when you leave the police force, you're no longer a cop. What are you going to do then? A lot of people die right after they retire. You need something. So go find something, and I would just hiking, walking, exercise, anything, go walk dogs for, volunteer to walk dogs. It's amazing. When you visit them, it's just a bunch of things that I've done. I've done so many things to make myself feel good after dealing with the police department. Drinking is definitely, up there sometimes. And that's why a lot of us, have drinking problems. And, a lot of us go to the farm because, we can't handle the stress and we turn to liquor. Some of us turn to opiates and illegal drugs. It's not easy. We do definitely go through a lot, and it's very stressful. And, the one advice I would tell the rookies who first come on is that, don't let them dirty you. Whatever other cops are there, whatever environment you go in, they're going to try to get you dirty. They're going to try to make you do something illegal so they have something against you. If you can avoid that, you'll be one step above, above whatever they're trying to do, because they're always trying to get you, and they'll get you into remember, Are You a Sheep or a Wolf in the movie? And he gives them I think it was marijuana laced with PCP, and he already dirtied him because now he just smoked an illegal contraband. So now he's got him. He's got one thing against him, and it's I think it's Training Day.
Yes, Training Day with Denzel Washington,
right?
and Ethan Hawke. Yeah,
epic scene. But it means a lot to me because that's the first thing they try to do is get something against you. So now you have to meet the quota. You have to do whatever they say or they'll use it against you. The number one thing for these people when you go there, try to be open-minded, try to take a lot of culture classes, try to understand cultures, understand the Indian, the African, Jamaican, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, understand the cultures because you have to have open mind when you go into that. You're going to be walking into their house and talking to them. There's something, if you want to fix the problem, whatever problem they have, because that's part of your job is you're there to help people, is you got to understand that things are going to happen. Be understanding. Don't be, I remember I went into the projects and there was a pool, a really small pool in the hallway, and they had a party in the hallway. And there was a miniature pool with water and the kids were in there, and my white partner was disgusted. He was like, look at these savages, and not most of us don't have a backyard, they can't go to the pool. Whatever the case is, it was not understanding. I just pulled over to the side and said, hey, I said, Mom, can you do me a favor, please? We can't have this pool here. Can we I'll help you. Can we take the water out and move it somewhere? Because it's a danger. And I just try to help her through it as opposed to going in and pointing fingers and calling her a savage, and that's what a lot of these officers go in there. They go in there with a mentality of, I was raised in Long Island. I have a backyard. I have I act a certain way. So everybody has to act that way. And when you're 20, you only know one thing. So when you see someone raising their kids a certain way, automatically they're a savage and have to treat you like a savage. So learn a little respect, be humble, and try to help somebody without letting them hurt you, because there are people who are going to hurt you. So your safety's first, but understand that this Jamaican is a certain way. This African is a certain way. This black person from New York is a certain way. Try to be understanding. And if you're fair, it will come back to you. In my career, I have very, very little. I've been involved in one way or another, 400 or 500 arrests, but involved, not arrest them, but involved in different arrests. And I don't get complaints. Early in my career, yes, but once I got mature and once I understood what was going on, I could talk to almost anybody and bring them down. And I could talk to their mothers after the son just finished fighting cops and did some stuff. I can talk to their parents, explain the situation with some empathy, give them the exact story and say, hey, if this is what you want to do, go ahead. There is video. I have to warn you, your son did A, B, C, and D. And this is how the police officers reacted. Your right is to sue. Go ahead and you do whatever you got to do, but I want you to understand what happened first. So I try to work with people. And to this day, no lawsuits, no very, very little complaints. So I would say learn your environment. Whoever you're policing, learn them. And don't let the department and the culture dirty you, because they're going to try. That'll be my advice.
Well, it's great advice. And you heard it here, people, from Officer Joe, that and we should be doing that in any field of industry that we get into. We should always learn our craft, learn whatever it is we're doing, and continue to educate ourselves in growing in whatever particular occupation or profession that we're in. I think it's very important what you said, and for those that are listening, if you are interested in becoming law enforcement, remember that it never ends. No matter what industry you get into, learn the people you're dealing with, learn the cultures, because it's just going to make you that much better at your profession and whatever it is you're doing. So great advice, Joe. A question I was going to ask you, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to go a little bit more in depth. Did you find yourself, because a lot of times when we get into these particular industries, it doesn't even matter what it is, but especially something like law enforcement or even military, where you develop this brothership and sisterhood and brotherhood, where you start looking at these people that you have to rely on them to protect your life. You have to look out for each other. So you develop very personal relationships with these people, and they wind up becoming your second family. And a lot of times with officers, and I've seen this, where they'll start to commune with only other officers. And I want to know, did you experience that, where you started hanging out with your fellow co-workers coworkers opposed to actually hanging out with your childhood friends or your friends and family? Or did you have a nice balance in between both? Or did you just keep work separate from your personal life and left it there and really didn't associate with the people that you got to know at work? Or what was your particular situation?
Well, most of the hanging out with other cops happened within the first 3 years. Because I went in, I was a little older than the rest of the guys. And I've been through a lot, I'm living in the streets of the Bronx and Brooklyn, and you learn how to deal with the streets. So I was a little more mature, and it only took me about a year to realize what the police department was trying to do. And yes, you start off getting into cliques. Let's say there's 15 of you show up at the precinct, and then you start hooking up with friends, and there's 3 or 4 of you that hang out all the time. You start hanging out with them, and you make them your family. They become your family, and you only hang out with them. And then you start noticing things that you're starting to change, and you start to push everybody away. You're starting to think one way. You're starting to think like them. They're savages. These people are animals. These people are mopes, and you start nicknaming groups of people. And so you sit there and you just realize, well, what are you doing? These are people that need help. And then eventually I was in that. I was in a little clique, and then I realized that after bad things started to happen, I immediately learned that I shouldn't be hanging with these guys because they're going in the wrong direction. One guy's drinking too much. The other one is a little too handsy. He's trying to hurt people, and you slowly start to just go. I slowly went in my own direction, and it came down to where I only hang out with one cop because there were too many cliques, and these cliques were very dangerous, and they were dangerous to my health. So I've learned very quickly. I adapted, and I went my own way. I work with them. I have a very close relationship working, but I try to separate my police world and my civilian world. And I try to embrace my civilian world, and I try not to tell the civilian friends that I'm a cop because I don't want to be treated differently. I just want to be treated like everybody else. I would lie and say I was in security, or I worked for Brinks, or whatever, whatever security people out there, because they might see me with my weapon one day. But I don't want them to treat me as a cop. I don't even want them to know I'm a cop. I just want to be treated like a regular person and have a good time. And that's how I got through it. But yeah, there's a lot of cliques out there, and it happened early in my career. And then after that, I learned that not too many good things happen. I remember going for a motorcycle ride early in my career and seeing other officers act like complete morons on the roads. And I'm thinking we're going to kill ourselves if we keep acting this way. And we rode once, never again. I don't want to ride with y'all because now you think you're above the law and you could drive like a savage and endanger people. So I stopped riding with them. And I don't know if you noticed, there was something that happened where I think an SUV ran over a cop, and then a whole horde of motorcycles stopped, and some of them were cops. They were like they destroyed his car, pulled him out, beat him up. They were cops.
Yep, he had a child in the back, his wife.
Yeah.
I actually saw that whole entire video.
So yeah, it was I didn't drive with them, but I rode with those type of people. But I learned quick, just don't do it. And it was just my maturity at the time that I could sit there and go, I'm going to find other friends. I don't want to ride with y'all. And you just learn. And even though private organizations where there were groups of people, there was car shows. And once I started noticing that certain people were in the criminal element, I just had to separate myself from them. It's not easy, but there are people out there. There are cliques that you can hang out with. They're just decent people, and you're going to be all right. But you always have one or two that want to push the envelope and do things. And what I find is the worst thing to hang out with is a drunk cop. It's not fun. For some reason, they always want to pull out their weapon while they're drunk, and you're like, "What, dude? What is your problem?" So
yeah, that's because of the liquid courage, right?
yeah. And
liquid courage is real.
Yes, and you have less. Your conscience is kind of like put to sleep. You're the part that makes good decision making. It's like that wall breaks down, and you just whatever you feel like doing, you just do it. And you have a gun. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I said, dude, you can't. So I just stopped hanging out with cops because of that. They just love pulling out their guns when they're drunk, and then they get everybody in trouble. And it's not pretty.
Hey, that's why alcohol is called spirits, right? Because you weaken yourself and you allow that portal to be open for those demonic spirits to take over you, and you start making really bad choices. I had ran away from home when I was 15 years old to Manhattan, Spanish Harlem, and I was selling drugs. I was selling heroin. And I remember during the David Dinkins days, Mayor David Dinkins, things were very lax with the police departments. You still had a lot of stuff going on, but crime was pretty rampant during the David Dinkins days. And I wanted to get your perspective from when Mayor Giuliani took over, because I noticed that when Mayor Giuliani took over, the gradual progression of police presence throughout the whole entire 5 boroughs was insane.
Yes.
I mean, it was like it went from not ever seeing a cop, now seeing a cop everywhere. And I wanted to get your insight and perspective on all that. And were you an officer during those years when Mayor Giuliani took over?
Towards the very end of it. I never got to experience the full Giuliani era. I respect it because, the Bronx was burning. Manhattan was all about, sex, drugs, and, and he had a good plan. I think it was him and Bratton that actually started this, broken windows theory. And there's a lot of, I believe in it. There's a lot of things that I believe in. I believe in stop and frisk. I believe in broken windows. It's the abuse and the way it's used is that I don't believe in it. I understand if you see somebody suspicious, you're going to stop them, but have a valid reason. And if you're going to stop a black guy, then you stop a white guy. You make it even. You don't sit there and only do black and Hispanics. Whoever's a criminal, whoever's acting suspicious, you want to stop them. That's one thing. That's what I believe. Let's be fair about it. Let's not just go into black and Latino neighborhoods. We know that people smoke marijuana if you're white or black evenly. It's normal. So why are only black people getting arrested for this? Or Hispanics? Doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. It's obviously they're targeting one race. So let's just be even with it if we're going to do this. If we're going to stop it, let's stop it. And let's redefine crime now. What is a real crime, and why should someone go to jail for, a roach as opposed to, hey, let's get some common sense. This guy should not go to jail because there's this little piece of residue. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I don't believe in it wholeheartedly, but yes, if I believe that, and I can articulate that this guy is a criminal and you legitimately fit the description because you're wearing orange sneakers, then yes, you should be stopped. But if you're not, then maybe they shouldn't be stopped, and it should be quick and fair, and not everyone should go to jail. Let's define what a real crime is. Let's put real criminals in jail, and everybody else, let's stop harassing the public because they don't need to be harassed. And let's do it evenly. If you can't have an open container in the South Bronx, when I go into Manhattan, these white people can't have open containers either. They get a summons the same way the black and Hispanic get a summons. You're going to make it even. Obviously, it's not. So it's unfair. It started off with Giuliani and Comstat, and I think they had a good idea. But abuse, the one thing I categorize the NYPD is abuse. They abuse every policy known to man. No matter what the policy is, guaranteed to abuse it because there's nobody there. It's always one person that says, I want one more summons. Let's just do this. Forget it. I don't care what anybody else says. We're arresting this guy. And he's a captain. He's a lieutenant. He has power. And now he has to arrest somebody. And now we have to make up a story so nobody gets in trouble. So there's no accountability. There's a lot. There's some things we could do. Yeah. There's some things we could do. We could keep crime down, and then there's all these people that make money over crime. The people that own the prisons. The private EMS companies that get called, and the tow truck companies, and everybody has their hand in the cookie jar. So it's very difficult to fix it because people are making money and they're very high up and they have power. So very, very difficult to fix the actual problem. But back in Giuliani days, he did make a difference. And Bratton, when they first started with this Comstat, it was working. And then when it got to like Kelly, they over-abused it. And it became a lot more draconian and race specific. It was only black men targeted, 15 to like 25. Crazy. It was literally, they said, this is the guy you bring in. Don't bring a white guy. Has to be black and Hispanic. So it was tough. But yet, let's say another precinct would not even hear about this because they didn't have the problem. Let's say they were in the shopping district in Manhattan somewhere. They didn't have the problem. They had a different type of problem. So they don't have no idea what I'm talking about because they didn't go through it. So every precinct was almost its own country with its own problems. So for the most part, Bronx and Brooklyn were similar. Manhattan was his own animal with his own politics. Queens was kind of like Manhattan. They had their own politics, and Staten Island was just a different world, just a totally different world. And in Long Island, just forget about that. That's another world.
Yeah, it is. It's funny how a lot of people from Staten Island never been off the island. They never been to Manhattan. They've been on that island all their life for a long period of time.
Yeah, we call that, I forgot what it was, but it's just a different world. We don't even call it part of the police department. It's a joke. If you work there, you kind of work for like a different county. You're not part of NYPD. You're just, the way they conduct themselves is totally different.
It's an island amongst itself. Like it's an island separate from everybody else, even though it's part of the 5 boroughs. It's like, I have a friend over there and she was telling me she's like, there's people in my family, there's people that live out here that never been away from here. They never been to New Jersey and they never been to Brooklyn or Manhattan. They never took the ferry. They literally lived their lives on that island without ever leaving. And I thought that was crazy, but it was so true. They somewhat become, I guess, institutionalized within their own borough. Yep. That's all they know.
And the police officers also, you just become a totally different cop. We always say that Manhattan South cops are a different type of cop. They get to take pictures with tourists and they stand on the corner and they voucher lost property and the soft part of policing.
Yeah.
And then you go to Brooklyn where every day you're wrestling 2-3 times a day and it's a totally different. The guy in Brooklyn is going to accumulate so much damage mentally and physically to his body. By the time he hits 5 years, he has like 15 years worth of knowledge and his body's beat up. Now this Manhattan South cop who's done 5 years, he's fresh as a daisy. And, he might have 10, 15 arrests for his career where that Bronx guy might have 100. And that's just the ones that he processed. Could be more than that, when the ones that he's involved in. But it's a different world. And that's another thing. They don't allow police officers to move around and get a break. So a lot of South Bronx people, they don't let them leave. You want a break, you want to go into a slower command and you put your time in. They don't let you. So it's selective. They like to use the word needs of the department. And that's just code word saying we're going to put you where we're going to put you and you're going to handle it. And if they don't want you to move, they just dirty you up. And that's it. And if you look at the data which they control, it'll prove that minorities out there, minority cops get disciplined more and they get treated unfair in the trial room and the NYPD trial room. And even in the court of law, you see that white people get less of a sentence than for the same crime than minorities. It's those statistics are out there. So,
oh, absolutely. Statistically, white people commit more crimes than anybody else in this country, but they're not in jail that much because they're getting off on these offenses and these crimes that they're committing. A lot of them get probation. A lot of them get their record expunged, or they get what's called ACD. Yeah,
some of them. Yeah, and you get a good lawyer, and
I've met white guys out here in Florida that have 26 felonies on file and are walking free.
Wow.
26. I met one guy who had 45 felonies and he was only 32 years old and still committing crimes, still a drug addict or whatever, doing bad things. And I was amazed by his story because I'm like, boy, this system is so corrupt. Like you over here walking around with 32 felonies. And it's because his father had some money, always had a good lawyer. His family had a name for themselves, but he had a bunch of these felonies and he was just walking around scot-free, whereas I remember I was going to be sent to jail for 7 to 10 years for marijuana.
To was the laws
state penitentiary.
Was it Jim Crow or there was certain laws that the Rockefeller laws.
This was in New Jersey where I was going to go to prison. I was living in New York. I was just visiting one of those rave parties, and the cops took all the marijuana that my friends had and put it on me, and then charged me with it, and then hit me with a bunch of other laws, like saying I was within 500 within 5 miles from a school. I mean, they were hitting me with everything. This district attorney was really trying to make a name for himself. And these kids were being caught with cocaine, ecstasy, Special K, and they were getting what's called PTI, pretrial intervention. And here I am with marijuana that all of it is not even mine. And they're hitting me with a second-degree felony with intent to distribute and all types of stuff. And it was a first offense, mind you. And they were trying to put me away in a federal state penitentiary for 10 years, 7 to 10.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, you know. But one of my last questions I want to ask you before we wrap things up on this broadcast is, you agreed with me when you said that that documentary of Crime and Punishment was really good and showing the way the court systems work with the bills and the policing. And, you know, the court system is, we were just talking about it. It's so corrupt. It is, I believe it's just a shit show. And I remember going to court, it just hurt my stomach. But all that being said, do you feel that those courageous 12 brothers and sisters, those officers, do you think that what they were able to do in what they did, as well as the documentary that brought it out to the world and all the different accolades that documentary got and different film festivals and stuff, do you feel that from your personal experiences from after that film was featured for everybody to see, do you feel like it made a significant difference in how the police department in the NYPD is now run? Did you see any change in how things were being administered from your perspective once you being in the force after everything was said and done?
Yeah, there have been some historic changes and again, adjustments. And I would say one of them being that the camera came out so that it'll, not only does it protect the cop, a lot of cops don't like it, but if you're an honest cop, it protects you. You're dealing with someone, you're giving them directions, you're telling them the reason why you're stopping them. They continue to act a certain way and they deserve to be arrested. It's there, black, white. The ADA can't change it. Your boss can't change it. You acted accordingly. You had probable cause to arrest. You arrested. So because of the documentary, that one of the changes came out because of that. Stop and frisk, there was a lot of notoriety that went to it. So people were paying attention to it. They didn't get rid of it. It's legal. But now they're like, hey, you just can't stop people for no reason. So a lot of people don't do it as much. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is stop and frisk is a good tool, but it should be used properly. What else did the documentary do? It emphasized the bail bondsmen, how unfair that is and how much money they make. Unfortunately, I think the law went a little too far in one direction. There's certain violent crimes that if a person should not be let, there's violent crime that people should not be let out of jail. And they should have a speedy trial so that they don't stay in jail that long. If they're innocent, they're innocent. If they're guilty, they stay in jail. That's just, the thing I do. When you rape somebody.
I feel the same way with pedophilia too.
Yeah.
Where these pedophiles are getting away.
You rape somebody, you're a pedophile. There's no bail. You give them a speedy trial. See what happens. If he was guilty, keep him in jail. If not, let him out. So there's certain things that they brought light to the bail bondmen. The other thing it did was it showed that a lot of the whistleblowers don't have any protection. And even with the whistleblower law, it has no teeth. They have no protection. The one thing that has not changed is that anybody who comes out and says something, they don't have that much protection. And if you want change, you got to protect those people that will uncover something that came out. If they come out and they whistleblow or whatever, they don't get attacked. They get protected. You investigate what they said. If it was true, you punish the people that committed it. That way, the next people, there'll be accountability and the next person won't do it because they saw that the person before them were fired, went to jail, something happened. A lot good from it. And it showed across a bunch of different states. They came out and they said also, I read a lot of things about like Texas and other places where they were saying, hey, we have the same situation, and they were addressing it. So they were, like the NYPD 12, they're NYPD 12 in New Jersey, in Texas, Virginia, etc. There's people out there who are coming out and doing something similar. So it's caused like positive. A chain reaction. And I could only imagine what what NYPD 12 is going through right now, because I'm pretty sure the system does not protect them. So I know that they're probably going through a lot, and I wish them well. God bless them.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you for coming on this show and sharing your testimony and your thoughts about your experiences in law enforcement. You're soon to retire. Any final comments that you want to share for the listeners for this particular episode, which is Erroneous Law Enforcement? Any last words that you want to share with us, Joe?
Yeah, the one thing I like to see, I see this a lot, and I'm worried about the community when they go out there and they have this interaction with a police officer. They have to be very careful. At the end of the day, this police officer has a gun, and if he or she makes a bad choice, they can end you, and they could lie and find evidence on you and do whatever, even though you're in the right. I see a lot of people going a little too far with these car stops, and when they get stopped, be very careful. It's good to record them. It's good to sue them right after the fact, but do not put your hands on. Don't give them a reason to shoot you. And so many people, I watch the videos, and they just do things that worry me, because the cops can shoot them, articulate way out of it, and if they're white and they have good lawyers, they can get away with it. So I would say just be careful when you have an interaction with a police officer. It's dangerous, and even though you're right, they have the court of law. Don't fight them, because you can get hurt, and a lot of times they might be indemnified, or they might just be asked to retire, and you will be injured for the rest of your life. So be careful out there. Know your rights, but don't go too far. Don't get hurt. It's not worth it. You always have a court. You have some lawyers. Do what you got to do. They get sued enough, eventually they'll stop. But just be careful. Very dangerous.
Well, you heard it here, folks. You heard it from Officer Joe that don't become the lawyer. They used to call me lawyer boy back in the days. Don't become the lawyer. Especially if you're not well versed in law. Don't start saying stuff that you've seen on YouTube just because you've seen some white guy saying, am I being detained, and then wound up walking away. Especially if you're a black or brown person, that doesn't always work with us. Okay. Matter of fact, 9 times out of 10, it never does. So just be aware. And like I always say on the show, just be cold and calm and show very, very little emotion, and just try to get the situation over with as quick as possible, because it's not worth your life over an altercation. So with that being said, Joe, I want to thank you again for coming on to the Network of Awareness for this episode of Erroneous Law Enforcement. I think that you brought great substance and information to this show. And for those that are listening that are looking to get into law enforcement, just come in understanding what you're getting into. And like Joe had said earlier, make sure that you're always studying. If you're going to be a police officer, be the best police officer for your community. Come in with a purpose to serve others instead of serving yourself, or wanting to become a police officer because you just want to have a gun and have this certain privilege that most people don't have when you become a police officer. So with that being said, Joe, thank you again. And like I always say, brothers and sisters, when you live in the present, there is always an opportunity for a new beginning. And don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel, because the light is and always will be within you. So light up that tunnel and find your way through the darkness. This is ORRA the Informationalist from the Network of Awareness, signing off on this Erroneous Law Enforcement episode. And peace and blessings, peace, love, and light. And be aware, brothers and sisters, be very aware. And all praises to the Most High. Let's go.
This concludes the Network of Awareness podcast. For more information on the Network of Awareness, please subscribe via email to our website, networkofawareness.com, and follow us on Spreaker.com or any other listening apps you use. For any questions about the NOA, email us at ORRA@networkofawareness.com. Thank you for listening to one of the fastest growing podcast shows on society and culture in America and abroad. When you live in the present, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings.